Hello, hello, everyone. I'm Vickie Howell. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I am really happy to be in your homes or wherever you are tonight. If you aren't familiar with me, my name is Vickie. I am a designer and author, amongst other things, and I am here to talk to you about my latest book and just kind of a fun new craft. Uh, my latest book is No Needles Knitting. And this is one that is a little bit, maybe not of the norm, but neither am I. But it's really fun, and I'm having a ton of fun with it. I'd love to give you a little bit of backstory, though. So, about a decade ago, I wrote another book that I only have the German edition up here with me because, of course, that's what I have. I wrote another book called Finger Knitting Fun.
Why
So
can't I see her?
yeah, so that's just, let's just like pretend that that says finger knitting fun. And it was for littles. It was really meant as an introduction to yarn. I believe that if you get kids being creative and passionate about any medium, I always told my kids, I don't care if you play a Fender Strat or pick up yarn, just as long as you're expressing yourself and being creative, like we're good. And this was sort of my love letter to that, introducing fiber. So at the time, this is my youngest. Um, they were, I want to say 4 or 5. Oh gosh, this was more. We shot the book longer than 10 years ago. And this is one of my other children. Um, he is now about to be 24. So it's been a minute, is my point. But this is one that, I've written a lot of books, and most of them are kind of traditional knitting or crochet books, with the exception of a couple that were more craft related. And but this one that was for kids, and people will buy books for kids, so that might be the real reason. But because it's for kids, it's stuck around for a while. And it really warms my heart to know that over a decade later, there's still littles that are maybe falling in love with yarn, or even if they're not that into yarn, they know now that they have the power to turn something into something else. And to me, that's huge. So I don't know. It takes forever to write a book. So let's say over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I was in a conversation with my publisher because a new version of Finger Knitting Fun, I have the English version of this one, is now out now. It was a collaboration that the publisher did with Amazon. So this is up right now on Amazon that they did. It's a revised version. It's a little smaller, like backpack size, and that's the big difference. There might be a couple projects that are missing, but pretty close. So we were talking about this, and I said, this one's stuck around for a minute, so maybe we should talk about doing a sequel. And my editor said to me, "Well, I can't wait to see what's new in finger knitting." And I went, "What what would be new with tubes?" And I was like, "Sure, no problem, no problem." So then what I started to do is I started to think, what would these kids who started finger knitting with me 10, 12 years ago be doing now? They might be in high school. They might be in college. They might be getting their first real job. They might be getting their first apartments, starting their lives, right? And so that got me more excited about just the prospect of how can you turn something into a viable craft for the next step. And this is not instead of traditional knitting or not instead of traditional crochet. This is, I am a bring on all the fiber crafts, all of the things, because if you get tired of one thing, there's another thing. If you get frustrated with one thing, there's another thing. Um, and so I started looking. And so where you find trends with the younger set, it's on TikTok. And what you should know is that I do not tick, and I barely talk. And you'll be able to see that if you go to TikTok and see my tens of followers. It's just not necessarily my medium. I'm more of an Instagram gal. So, but I went there and I typed in finger knitting. What came up wasn't technically finger knitting, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what came up instead was something that we are calling no needle knitting, but also will refer to as hand knitting. And I'll talk a little bit about that too in a second. What these teens and 20 somethings were doing were creating garments and blankets and other wearables out of flat panels with their fingers and their hands, but not the tubes that we think about when we think of finger knitting, you know, like these. And so that was upside down. I just realized that. And so then I got really excited because that I can work with, that I can create things that, viably a teenager, a 20 something, a forever, 21, 41, 51 something would be interested in. And I got really excited because if you can make flat panels using the knit stitch, that means you can also do everything else that you would normally do with traditional knitting. And that is sort of how the journey of this book started. Okay, so this book uses what we're calling hand knitting. If you do the Googles or look on TikTok or Instagram, you may not find it that way, or you may, because it's confusing, right? Like we've always called hand knit means you use the needles and you knit. It's a little confusing. We're only going to be using our hands. Some people call it finger knitting. Technically, finger knitting is the one that you do just on your fingers and it makes the tubes. However, they're not wrong because you use your fingers. Another semi-common term is table knitting. My point is there's a lot of things, but for the purposes here, for this book and for this class, we're going to be calling it hand knitting. So I'm going to be giving you a demo in a second, and then later on, I'm going to give you a tour through a little bit of a trunk show, not all of the things. But first, before we get started, I wanted to talk yarn because this particular craft, because we are, you know what, I want to step back for a second. Before I do that, I want to talk about who this book and this craft are for. I've already talked about, teens or 20 somethings. But that is not it. In fact, the more that I delved into this project and writing it, the more that I realized that there were some pretty incredible things that you could make on a bigger scale. I am obsessed with playing with scale. I love taking little tiny projects and turning them into something grand and just playing with just different sizes of fibers. Um, but for this, I also, not for this, in addition to that, I've started talking to people and, I'm like, well, I'm in as a middle-aged lady, and I've already told you about the younger set, but then I've had conversations about the older set and about how some people start to have a harder time holding the smaller needles. Your hands get stiff. Um, it's just kind of cumbersome. Well, this is another set of people that this might be great for because you can still make things, you can still be creative, and you can still use your hands without having to have all of that stress. So the reason that it would cause less stress is because of the size of yarn. So this is a true story. There are a few types of yarn in here. But you should know two things. One, when I started writing this book, Joann was not going to close. So some of the yarns in the book are private label. We now know that Michaels has bought some of them and Hirschner's has other ones, so that's fine. It just means they're a little less accessible, so I'll talk about where you can get them. But two, there's a thing called yarn standards, and some of you might be familiar. You may not know where they come from, but you might be familiar with the different weights of yarn. The most standard one is number 4. That's also known as worsted weight. And then it goes chunky 5, and then bulky, super bulky, so on and so forth. Well, the when I started writing this book, the highest number was jumbo, number 7. And that meant above super bulky to infinity. And at the time when those standards were written, probably, 10 years ago, that was plenty. Um, and I'll show you what that would be. So that would be a number 7 would be something like this. You guys have all seen these in the craft store. They're super, they're chenille, they're fun. And this works great. This is great for, for anything that you want to make. There is a full-on bathrobe in the book that that's made out of this. You can make rugs, you can do, tops, whatever. So this would be a 7. This would also be a 7. This is also a great yarn to use. This is Amano Yana XL. So if you wanted to um, use a little bit of fancier yarn, and that's the other thing, you can either go affordable craft yarn, or you can go maybe a little spendier. This craft is really makes it accessible for everyone because there's all price points, but also you don't have to have any experience at all. So if you've got, kids coming home from college during the break and you're like, we got to find something to do, start this. If you're having girls over, or ladies or men over, have wine, bust out some supplies, and you can have them working on something within, 15, 20 minutes. Same goes for that friend that, always said they wanted to knit, but do they really want to? Are they really? This is the craft. So you can still support your local yarn store, or you can go accessible and do the craft store. That's another one. So you get the idea. Well, oh, and this is another one. So this is actually a really great yarn to use for this craft. It is Bernat Big Plush, I think is what it's called. And I have all of this listed in the book and on my website, VickieHowell.com. And this was the 7. Okay, so you can see it right here. But there's another yarn that I use for a lot of the home decor items in this book. And I'm going to just grab one. And it was also fell under the 7. Now you can see that's a pretty big difference. And especially when, even though they're the same type of yarn, see, they're both called, it's going to come back to me, tube yarns, because they have this sort of like inner core. You can get them with polyester. You can go fancy and go like a flax and twine, and it's all done with cotton and without seams. There's all kinds of things that you can do. But this is a big difference gauge-wise. Gauge, we may know, but if we don't know, is how many stitches per inch you get. Does that really matter if you're making a scarf? Probably not. You're not going to live and die if it's 1 inch or 2 inches different. If you're making something that you want to fit, it absolutely matters. And if you want something to fit over, say, a pillow cushion or, something like that, it matters. But the other reason that it matters is because you will not get the same look of a stitch. And I'll show you in a bit what it's going to look like. You will have a bigger stitch, or I'm sorry, more negative space, the lighter weight yarn that you would, just like if you were knitting. If you were knitting let's say a DK weight yarn, if you knit it on size 9s, you'd have a big old space. If you knit it on 5s, you wouldn't. Well, our hands are not predictable like that. But it was really important to me that people didn't feel like they weren't being successful because they said, I got the 7 when this was the 7 that they needed to have success. And that made me, I didn't love it. Well, I just happened to be on the committee at that time for the yarn standards updates that were being done. So I jazz hand and I showed some examples. And as of now, there is now an 8 giant. You will not find it on labels yet. It's going to be a minute for that. It is probably going to be a minute before it's even on websites. It is up on yarnstandards.com. They did me a solid. It hasn't been updated yet, but they at least put copy at the top so nobody's confused. So now we have a giant and we've got a jumbo. the little wins, people. So as you can see, there was a lot that happened over the, year of writing this book. So in addition to this type of yarn, so you can use the chenille yarn. The tube yarn is great, as I said before. Um, you can use a yarn like this that looks like a hot mess because I keep using it, but this is a more of a roving yarn. This is from Knit Collage. I think this is Wanderlust. There's a top made out of this that I'll show you later. You can use, oh, the third weight is number 6, which is a super bulky. You can use super bulky, and those are really, they're much easier to find, especially now that there's not as many craft stores, and yarn stores don't tend to carry the heavy ones because they take so much real estate and they don't sell as well. So, but what you can do is you can double strand so super bulkies. So here's an example. This is not the one I used in the book. I used one from Knit Picks called Fairy Tale Fur. But a fur like this absolutely works. It works great. I just recommend doubling it. Otherwise, you're going to have a big net, which might be your gig. And if it is, you do you. These yarns, there's Cascade Magnum and then Barocco Macro are both great too. And so all you would do is you would just double strand them and they work great. The scarf that you see right here is worked with double strands, and I'll talk a little bit about that easier. So there's a lot of ways that you can go, and you can go fancy or you can go not fancy. It's totally your gig, but it's really good to know what you're working with and what results you're going to get. As a side note, this is one of the yarns that is a little bit harder to, it's not hard to get. It's just you can't walk into a yarn store and now a craft store to get it. You can find this. So this one happens to be Lion Brand, and it is called Cover Story Squish Stitch. And you can get that on their site. But there's also a ton of different ones like no name brands on Amazon and on Etsy that you can try. There used to be one that was private label Joanne, and I don't see it yet up on Michael's, so I'm going to message them. But just so you know, there are other places to get it, but you're not going to be able to sort of impulse buy and like run out and get it in makeup. So I wanted to give you a little prep in case you decide to order the book, and the link, it should be in the chat. You will be able to get started as soon as it gets here. Okay, I've babbled on for long enough. I will come back here and do a little bit of a trunk show after the demonstration, but I think it's probably time now that we learn a little something. All right, I am going to change cameras. So you just want to make sure that you can see the camera that has the book. I'm going to be working with some more tube yarn just because I think that it demonstrates really nicely. But like I said, so many yarns work great. I think this might be a Lion Brand one too. I think this is called Lux or something like that. Okay, so what we're going to be learning is how to create the foundation and how to do the knit stitch. We might show how to do garter too, and I'll explain what that means in this method, and how to bind off. Okay. So ironically, this is called hand knitting, but it begins with crochet. So what we need to do is we need to start with the foundation chain. So to do that, we're going to leave enough of an end so it doesn't come unraveled, and we're going to create a slip knot. So to do that, we want to make a little loop-de-loop. You've got your working yarn, and the working yarn is the yarn that's connected to the skein of yarn. And we want to push that loop through, and that's your slip knot. And you pull it so it's pretty taut. Okay, from here, you're going to do what's called the chain stitch in crochet. So we take our fingers and we pinch and pull, and that's one chain. And we're going to keep doing that. And you would do this for however many chains that the pattern calls for, or about the length that you want the piece to be. So I'm just going to pick a random number, and you keep going. Okay, so we've got our chains. This is your foundation. This is also the end of your crochet journey. From now on, we will be knitting. So you'll see that you have this one loop. This counts as your first stitch. When you're knitting with this method, you're never going to be working on the back of the piece. So for those of you that are traditional knitters, you know that stockinette stitch is normally created by knitting on one side and purling on the other. For those of you that aren't, just ignore what I'm saying. But because we're never working on the back side, much like if you were knitting with needles in the round, you only have to do the knit stitch. So to do that, first we're going to pick up loops. So we're going to take our yarn and have it so it lays across. So as you can see, you absolutely need to have a flat surface. Your back will thank you that you make it a table and not the floor, but the floor does work. Just please do me a solid and stop and stretch every 20 minutes. All right, so we've got our first stitch, so we can ignore that. What we need to do is pick up a loop in every chain, so every one of these little guys that we created. So we just take our fingers and we pinch and we pull. And the goal is to get it about the same height as the one before, just to keep it even. It's not life or death, but it's a goal. So you're going to pick up those stitches. And see, I didn't like how that one looked. It was a little bit too long. So all you have to do is kind of tug on the yarn next to it. You're going to do that all the way across. Okay, once you have your loops, your row one is done. Okay, so you won't ever be working in chains anymore. Now, until the end of your project, depending on what you're making, that you'll just continue doing what I'm going to be showing you next, and that is the knit stitch. So we are going to be working much like you would if you're a weaver, back and forth, back and forth. So we have to move our yarn that way as well. So when the working yarn is over here, we'll be working left to right and then vice versa. And I'll show you that one too. So we're going to lay our yarn behind it, and then we take our loop and we just push the next one through. And we continue that in every loop to the end. And again, the goal is to get them about the same height, just so that your stitches are relatively even. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but just, where you can. And you do that all the way across. Okay, so we've just worked a row. So then we're going to go the opposite direction. And what you'll see is that you can already see that knit fabric. Isn't that cool? And what was that, like 10 minutes of instruction? And you've got this look. So that means that you got a friend over, you hand them this, and they're making something. Maybe not with this yarn, but if it was a different yarn, they could be on their way to making their own scarf, because this is literally, I mean, you could have this, it would just be super puffy. This is literally all you do until you're done. So you just repeat back and forth. And because you can do this and create the stitches that look just like if you were working on needles or a knitting machine even, that means that you can also do almost any of the techniques that you can with either of those methods too. And that's really fun. And I delve a little bit into that into this book too. All right, so this is stockinette stitch, which means when you're flat knitting, you knit every row. But if you want to do what's called garter stitch, and that is, I'll show you an example when we're done, but that gives you, or actually I can show you here. So you have these bumps. The other one was stockinette stitch. That looks more like what you would think of when you think of traditional knitting. To create these bumps, we have to alternate between knitting and purling. So we're going to call the first row where we pulled up our loops our knit stitch because it basically was. So on the way back, we need to purl. So to do that, we're going to put our strand across just like we did before. And then we're going to put it in front this time. So instead of pulling it from the back, we're going to push it from the front through. And what that does is that causes the other loop to lean over it to kind of give it a big hug. And that's where you get the bump. And again, you can kind of stop every once in a while. See if you're relatively the same height. You can already see how different that looks, just that thing. So then the next row, we have to alternate. So now we're doing the knit stitch. So now we're going back to what I showed you in the first place. We're going to come from behind. Now you may notice that I'm using my pincher fingers. Sometimes I'll use, 3 fingers. Just like if you were using a needle or a hook, the bigger the tool, the bigger the hole. So if you wanted to use your whole hand and pull it through, you could, but you're going to get a much bigger stitch. But if you wanted to do something really netted with this particular yarn, then that might be something that you consider. When you're working with different yarns, you can also play with that. Maybe it means that you need to use 3 fingers because you want more space. Maybe you just use 2. Maybe you use your whole hand. Just play with it. Okay, and then I'll just work one more just to come back. And you can really see you have your garter stitch. In this particular yarn, this is so scrunchy. In the book, this is the bottom of a pet bed. One of my favorite projects in the book is this pet bed that's super gushy. But this stitch in general would be great for a bath mat or a scarf or really anything. Okay, so those are the two main stitches. And like I said in the book, we go way past that. But as you can see, like anybody can do this. So the last thing that I want to show you as far as demonstration goes is how you finish off. So we started with the foundation chain, we learned the knit stitch, we learned the purl stitch. Now we're going to do what's called binding off. So to do that, you're just going to knit the first 2 stitches, and then you take the second stitch, the first one that you knit, but the second from your hand, and slide it over the one closest to the left-hand side, and you can see that's finished off. See how that has a nice clean edge? From here on out, you don't have to knit 2. You only have to knit 1. So you go to the next stitch, pull a loop through, pass that loop on the right over it. There's another one bound off. Sometimes I'll put my other fingers in there just to hold the loops if I feel like they might be sliding out. And you're just going to keep doing this all the way to the end. And then you get to the last stitch, all you would do is you would snip your yarn, you'd cut it off, pull it tight, and that's not there. and you would be all done. You'd weave in ends with this kind of yarn. There's a little extra step you need to do that's covered in the book, but with your usual yarns, that wouldn't be the case. So that's what that looks like with that tube yarn. This is the roving yarn. This is a double strand of super bulky. This happens to be, I think this is the Barocco macro. This is knit stitch, the same stitch as this. And there's a blanket in the book that is made with this. But there are swatches to show you that you can take that pattern and make what looks like a completely different project, but it's exactly the same stitches. They just look monumentally different with the different yarns. And that's a double strand of that, and you can see that. Well, it looks like it's 3, it's actually 2, it's just the way the yarn's made. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you is, so the tube yarn, we talked about this, the thinner one. You can also do things like cables. Isn't that fun? So there's a hat in, there's a beanie in the book that you can make, but I think this would be really great too, just by itself. Maybe as a square and do a bunch for a blanket, or turn it into, I don't know, I just think it looks cool. Frame it, call it a day, I don't know. And then the other thing that you can do is shaping and even a little lace. So you can increase to create, this is a top center out shawl, or it's the beginning of, it's a swatch for it. And there is a version of this as well, and I'll show it to you in a second. It's just a slightly different yarn that is in the book as well. So unlike finger knitting, for the littles, there are all kinds of things that you can do. And I think it's just super empowering. Okay, I would love to now show you some stuff from the book. So I am going to come on back to you, allegedly. And you do not need this one anymore. Okay. Oh, and you can see the flower. Can you see the flowers behind me over there? So this is also a project in the book that I was not planning on showing you, but since we're taking a tour. So this is finger knitting for bigs, for artsy bigs. You're still doing that same thing. It's still the fingers, it's child play, but because this is all scraps and it's different yarns, some expensive, some not expensive, it gives this really cool sort of modern textural look. And it's a way that you can make sort of a child's craft really appeal to a broader age range. All right. Um, okay, I see people talking. I'll look at them later. So let me show you some projects. You saw swatches for this. This is one of my favorites, really. This is really great. I think I might have pitched this to teach. I'm definitely teaching this for any of you that are part of Knit Collage's creative knitters. I have yarn on the way, and I'm going to make like a fancy version out of that, and I'm going to be teaching that just for them. So that's coming up, I think, in January, so keep your eyes open. But this is really great because you can create plaid, you know, very easily. This is done in just garter stitch, which I just showed you, so you know what to do. And then with double strands of yarn woven over and under those bumps. So really easy. So this is called the meta tartan. If you wanted to have just a one skein project that's used with this big velveteen because it's fun and it's like, why not? But it's a little bit, it's heavy. It's like you need a 2-pound ball, so it's heavy, so it gets a little spendier. So maybe you just want a 1 ball project. This scarf is literally foundation chain, pick up the loops, bind off, and then you're done. So this is another thing. This would be so fun. You have to do it on the floor, have the ladies over, the gents, the ladies, and take up the entire floor, but everybody can have a scarf within, an hour. So a really fun project. Okay. And I'm not wearing any of these because it is legit still 80 degrees in Austin in November. So otherwise I would be. Um, so this is a fringe shawl. It's more open weave than needles, but I think that's very like right now, like the whole Stevie Nicks witchy vibes are super in. And this one I think fits the bill. So this is called Fringe Fest. And it's super fun. It's made from the top center out. So um, this should maybe be your second or third project, whereas that scarf could be your very first project. Um, this pillow. So this is worked in stockinette, but this is applied I-cord, so a little bit fancier. And this is hand crocheted. These petals are hand crocheted. And I have a whole playlist on YouTube that has tutorials for this stuff. But I really just wanted to show that you can think outside the box and really use this as an art medium as well. And this is that Bernat plush, big plush, I think it's called. And the blanket that's behind me, this is all log cabin. That's made with the same thing. Um, this is a top that you can make in, a couple hours, like a little vest. This is actually the type of project that a lot of the like teens, 20 somethings are making on TikTok because you can make it in a weekend. You could probably make it in about 6 hours total, to be honest with you. So a big cozy sweater. This is a double strand of Knit Picks Tough Puff, I think. So it can also be affordable, especially if you are sending this book with some yarn for some college kids. You can, that's something that's doable. So super fun, and they can get it. They don't have to know how to do much. This is literally just squares and rectangles, and then I did some minor shaping. So that is super fun. This one might be my favorite. It's so heavy though. This is a floor cushion I made. So this is that same yarn. I got some what do you call it? Upholstery foam, and I just worked around it, but it looks complicated. It's not. It's again just those knit stitches, and I just did a bunch of panels and whip stitched them together with the yarn. But you can also use some alternative. Well, I already showed you the fur, but you can also make things that you wouldn't expect. Like this little cross bag. This is also made with hand knit, and it's shaped. And there is even in this one, there's even a little lining situation. So it doesn't have to be limited to anything that seems like ginormous or, crazy. You don't have to do it in faux fur either. I just wanted to. So this is that fairy tale fur. I think it's Knit Picks. And then, another reason that we love hand making is just for the sustainability, just for, just kind of stepping away from fast fashion. And another way that you can really sort of contribute to doing our part for the environment is upcycling and recycling things. And so this bag is made with old t-shirts that I turned into yarn, and that tutorial is also on my YouTube playlist for the book. And I show how to I made this t-shirt yarn just a little bit thicker than you would, this is not new. People making t-shirt yarn, for years and years, but I made it thicker so that it would work with this particular technique. Really fun. And if you go and you find like a color scheme of shirts, then you can play with it and have a lot of fun. And you can find handles just online. I like the ones that you can hand sew like this because um, machine sewing might work, but there's a lot of variables here that could screw it up. So just these ones where you can do a little cross stitch is nice. There's so much more, but I think that that's all I have right in my hands. So that is just a taste of it. And then the last reason that I really wanted to do this was I wanted to give kids and people like of all ages, something just fell, um, something to do with their hands. It's becoming more and more talked about that there's a lot of neurodivergence, a lot of ADHD, a lot of fidgeting, a lot of anxiety, and you can get a fidget spinner, or you can click on a pen, or you could do whatever, or you can make something. Um, and be using your hands while you are watching TV or listening, listening to a book or whatever it is, and actually be creating something and feel that sense of success from that. So, if you've got kids in your life, teenagers, 20 somethings, you know, middle-aged ladies like me or beyond, have a little party. Give it a try. So again, the book is No Needle Knitting. I'm going to be doing some classes and workshops. Hopefully, I'm starting to schedule them. I know it's a little late. Um, over the next year, probably. I know that I will be at, there's a brand new convention, a craft convention for consumers, and it is called the Fiber and Fabric Craft Fest. And it's going to be in the Chicago area in April. And I'm definitely, Jen, we're gonna do a Stitchwell Social Club meetup too. As a sidebar, Stitchwell Social Club is my community. I would love it if you would join. It's a really special place to be. Check it out. You can find all of this on my website as well. And then I'm also going to be doing, I think I'm going to be doing a pet beds class, and I think I'm going to, there's some other things. But if you are a craft store or a novelty store or a museum or a pub or a I don't know, gift store, and you think, and you put on events and you think that it might be fun to um, create a class, message me. I would love to do that. I can either do in person, depending on where you are, or I can even Zoom in and teach everyone. This is super accessible. This is something that grandparents and parents can do with their kids, or not. But anybody can do that. So please just let me know. All right, everyone, if you have any questions, please just let me know. This will be on YouTube, probably not tonight, but within 24 hours. You can find this book really anywhere that you get your books online. Barnes and Noble, Indigo for all the indie stores, all of the places. And then of course, the Amazons. And I just put a link in the chat. All right. If there are any questions that I missed, and I'm sure that I did, apologies. I will.
I think everybody was pretty good about answering questions because a lot of us
Oh,
have the book.
thank
So,
you so much. Oh,
yep,
thank you so much.
it was
Thank you,
great.
team. This is why the community is amazing. Um, Okay, yeah, it looks like we're good. All right, everyone, thank you so much for spending an evening with me. I know it is not easy to carve out this time, especially when we have all different time zones. So I really appreciate your time. Again, No Needle Knitting. If you have littles, right now on Amazon is Fun and Easy Finger Knitting. I think Finger Knitting Fun's also, whatever, either one of them. And then, of course, I have a ton of other like traditional books too. Don't forget Knit Vibe if you like a deep dive into everything that relates to fiber. Okay, have a great rest of your evening, and I hope to be hand knitting with you soon. Bye.
Thank you.